In the silent, unending blackness, 400 kilometers above the Earth, the universe holds its breath. Down below, a tapestry of swirling clouds and city lights sprawls across the curve of a tranquil blue marble. For the 3 voyagers aboard the Shenzhou 20 spacecraft, this is a place of profound beauty and meticulous routine. Commander Li Wei, a veteran of 2 previous missions, glides through the module with practiced ease. His crewmates, Dr. Chen Jie, a brilliant materials scientist, and pilot Zhang Hao, a former fighter ace, are performing final checks for their approach to the Tiangong space station. The mission is a triumph of engineering, a symbol of a nation's ambition. It is a ballet of orbital mechanics, a testament to human ingenuity. There is no sound in the vacuum of space. This is a fundamental truth, a law of physics. Yet, in an instant, this truth feels like a lie. A violent, bone-jarring shudder rips through the Shenzhou capsule. Alarms, silent for weeks, scream into life with a cacophony of electronic shrieks. Red lights flash across the control panels, painting the astronauts' startled faces in a crimson glow of emergency. The serene dance has been brutally interrupted. A silent impact delivered with the energy of a bomb has just rewritten their destiny. The crew, highly trained for any conceivable emergency struggle against the sudden chaotic spin of their capsule. Outside their viewport, the familiar, steady panorama of the Earth has become a sickening, disorienting blur. The stars themselves seem to streak by in a terrifying vortex. On the ground, in the cavernous, dimly lit expanse of the Beijing Aerospace Command and Control Center, 1,000 calculations have turned to ash. Telemetry streams that were once a river of green nominal data have become a waterfall of red warnings. The voice of the capsule communicator, calm and measured just moments ago, is now strained, calling out into the void. Shenzhou 20, this is Beijing. Report your status. We show a depressurization event. The reply, when it finally comes through a crackle of static, is breathless, punctuated by the grunts of exertion. It is Commander Li's voice, a man of iron, will now tinged with a note of profound disbelief. Beijing, we've been hit. We have a hull breach in the service module. We are in an uncontrolled rotation. Main propulsion is offline. The weapon that struck them was not launched from any nation. It carried no warhead and was guided by no intelligence. It was an anonymous ghost, a spectre of missions long past. The culprit was a piece of metal no larger than a shoebox. It was likely a fragment from a defunct Soviet reconnaissance satellite, a forgotten relic of the Cold War launched in the 1980 seconds. For nearly 4 decades, this metallic shard had been patiently circling the globe, one of millions of such pieces of celestial refuse. It was a silent, mindless projectile, traveling at over 28,000 kilometers per hour, a velocity at which even a fleck of paint can carve a crater in solid aluminum. This single forgotten remnant of a bygone era had just placed China's most ambitious space mission on the brink of catastrophe. The 3 taikonauts of Shenzhou 20 were no longer voyagers. They were castaways stranded on the most hostile ocean imaginable, their vessel crippled, their path home erased. To truly comprehend the nature of this invisible menace, we must journey back in time, back to the dawn of the space age, an era of boundless optimism and fierce competition. In 1957, the launch of Sputnik 1 was a turning point for humanity. It was a gleaming sphere, a new star in the heavens, but it was not alone. Trailing behind it was the upper stage of the R-7 rocket that had carried it to orbit. This was the first piece of man-made detritus left in space. It was Adam, the progenitor of a vast and growing family of orbital debris. In the decades that followed, the Cold War superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, filled the skies. They launched satellites for communication, for espionage, for science, for prestige. With each launch, they left something behind. Spent rocket boosters, payload shrouds, deployment springs and bolts. Satellites would eventually run out of fuel or suffer malfunctions, becoming inert, metallic husks silently tumbling through the void. In this grand cosmic race, the heavens were seen as infinitely vast, a celestial dump so large it could never be filled. It was a profound miscalculation. Imagine a pristine, untouched lake, its water crystal clear. The first few explorers to visit toss a single bottle into its depths. It is a minor transgression, almost unnoticeable. More visitors arrive over the years, each leaving a small piece of refuse. Decades pass. The accumulated trash is now a visible layer on the lakebed. Then two large ships navigating the now crowded waters collide. Their cargo spills out, creating a massive field of wreckage. Finally, a speedboat driver in a show of force deliberately blows up an old abandoned barge. The explosion sends thousands of tiny, sharp fragments across the entire lake, making it hazardous for anyone to navigate. The lake, once a symbol of purity and exploration, has become a treacherous swamp. This is the story of low Earth orbit. The man who first foresaw the full extent of this looming crisis was a NASA scientist named Donald J. Kessler. In 1978, he published a seminal paper that was at the time largely seen as a piece of distant, almost abstract science fiction. Kessler proposed a chilling chain reaction. He calculated that once the density of objects in a particular orbit reached a critical point, a single collision could set off a cascade. The initial impact would generate thousands of new fragments. Each of these new projectiles would then increase the probability of further collisions, which would in turn create even more debris. The result would be an exponential growth in orbital junk, a self-sustaining blizzard of high-velocity shrapnel. Eventually, this process would render entire orbital bands impassable, a deadly invisible barrier encircling our planet, trapping us on our world for generations, perhaps even centuries. This terrifying scenario became known as the Kessler syndrome. For years it was a theoretical boogeyman, a distant warning. Then theory began its terrifying transformation into reality. On January 11, 2007, the world of spaceflight changed forever. China, in a controversial demonstration of military capability, launched a kinetic kill vehicle, a type of anti-satellite missile. Its target was one of its own aging weather satellites, the Fengyun 1C. The missile met its target at a blistering relative velocity. The resulting impact was cataclysmic. The satellite, weighing nearly a ton, was not just disabled, it was obliterated instantly, vaporized into a cloud of over 3,000 trackable pieces of debris, and likely hundreds of thousands of smaller, untrackable ones. It was the single largest debris-generating event in history. Overnight, the orbital environment became significantly more dangerous. The international space community was aghast. This single act had polluted a shared global commons, endangering the satellites of all nations, including China's own. The ghost of Kessler's theory loomed larger than ever. Just 2 years later, on February 10, 2009, the first major accidental collision between two intact satellites occurred. Iridium 33, an operational American communications satellite, and Cosmos 2251, a defunct Russian military satellite, crossed paths over the Siberian tundra. There was no one to direct traffic, no way to avoid the inevitable. The two spacecraft, with a combined mass of over 1.5 tons, collided at a speed of nearly 42,000 kilometers per hour. The resulting explosion of metal and electronics created two new dense clouds of debris, adding another 2,000 trackable fragments to the orbital catalogue. The Kessler syndrome was no longer a prophecy, it was an active, ongoing process. The lake was becoming a minefield, and now aboard Shenzhou 203 human beings are paying the price for decades of negligence. Their vessel is a wounded bird tumbling through the darkness. The impact from the Soviet satellite fragment punched through the unpressurized service module. It severed vital coolant lines, damaged the main engine nozzle, and most critically shredded one of the two main solar arrays. Power is now a resource more precious than air. Working in the cramped confines of the re-entry capsule, the only part of the ship still holding pressure, the taikonauts fight to regain control. Pilot Zhang Hao, his face beaded with sweat, fires the small attitude control thrusters in short, precise bursts. He is fighting the violent spin, trying to stabilize their craft, a process akin to taming a wild animal in zero gravity. Each burst of the thruster consumes precious propellant, the same fuel they would need for a potential rescue maneuver. Dr. Chen Jie, the scientist, is frantically rerouting power, shutting down every non-essential system to conserve their dwindling energy reserves. The ship's internal heaters, the scientific instruments, even the cabin lights are sacrificed to feed the life support systems and communications array. Their world has shrunk to this tiny, cold, dimly lit metal sphere. Commander Li Wei maintains the link to Beijing. His voice is the only bridge across the 400-kilometer chasm. He relays damage reports, system statuses, and crew condition with a professionalism that belies the desperate nature of their situation. But beneath the veneer of a test pilot's calm, he is a husband and a father staring into the abyss. He knows the brutal calculus of their predicament. Their solar array is crippled, meaning their batteries cannot fully recharge. They are on a countdown, their available power bleeding away with every passing minute. Their main engine is useless, meaning they cannot perform the deorbit burn that would allow them to return to Earth. They cannot reach the Tiangong space station, their safe harbor, which now glides tantalizingly in a slightly different orbit, an unreachable paradise. They are trapped. In Beijing, the mood is one of controlled panic. The initial shock has given way to a frantic search for solutions. Engineers and mission planners, some of the finest minds in the nation, huddle around screens displaying cascading lines of code and complex orbital diagrams. Every option is on the table, no matter how improbable. Could the remaining thrusters be used to slowly, painstakingly lower their orbit? The calculations are grim. They do not have enough propellant. Could the crew perform a spacewalk to try and repair the damage? The risk is astronomical. The service module is a wreck of sharp, torn metal, and the uncontrolled tumble of the spacecraft would make any EVA suicidal. The hull breach itself is evidence that the debris cloud they pass through could still be in their vicinity. To go outside would be to invite another potentially fatal impact. The conversation shifts to the only viable yet terrifying option, a rescue. Launching a second Shenzhou spacecraft is a monumental undertaking. A typical launch campaign takes months of preparation, testing, and integration. They need to do it in days. An emergency protocol, long theorized but never implemented, is activated. At the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center, deep in the Gobi Desert, engineers begin the round-the-clock work of preparing a Long March 2F rocket. This rocket, the workhorse of China's human spaceflight program, becomes the focal point of all their hopes. It must be rolled out, fueled and mated with a new modified Shenzhou capsule. This rescue vehicle will be a stripped-down lifeboat. It will launch with a single pilot, or perhaps even autonomously, to save weight and simplify the mission. It must then perform a perfect rendezvous and docking with a tumbling, powerless spacecraft. It is an orbital maneuver of breathtaking complexity, a feat of precision never before attempted under such duress. The margins for error are non-existent. The crisis of Shenzhou 2.0 does not exist in a vacuum. It immediately becomes a global event, a geopolitical flashpoint. News of the stranded taikonauts sends ripples through the international community. At NASA in Houston and at Roscosmos near Moscow, mission controllers watch with a sense of professional empathy and dread. Every person who has ever flown in space or dedicated their lives to sending others there understands the terrifying fragility of the thin metal shell that separates life from the lethal void. There are offers of assistance. The United States has its Dragon capsules, Russia its Soyuz. Both are technically capable of reaching the stranded crew, but orbital mechanics are a cruel tyrant. The orbits of the International Space Station where these vehicles are based are inclined differently from that of the Tiangong. Mounting a rescue from the ISS would require a massive change in velocity, a feat for which neither the Dragon nor the Soyuz has nearly enough fuel. A new launch is the only way. But launching an American or Russian rocket would involve sharing sensitive data, navigating a labyrinth of international treaties and military suspicions. The clock is ticking for the taikonauts, while on Earth the gears of politics and diplomacy grind slowly. The tragedy of the commons which polluted their orbit now threatens to thwart their rescue. China, fiercely proud of its self-reliant space program, announces it will proceed with its own rescue effort. The fate of Li Chen and Zhang rests on the shoulders of the engineers in the Gobi Desert, for the stranded crew time begins to warp. The 90-minute cycle of an orbit, once a beautiful rhythm of sunrise and sunset, becomes a cruel reminder of their imprisonment. Each pass over their homeland brings a brief window of direct communication, a few precious minutes to talk to their families, their voices traveling across the void as faint electronic signals. They exchange words of love and reassurance, a heartbreaking performance of normalcy in the face of death. Then silence returns as their trajectory carries them over the vastness of the Pacific. The cold deepens in the cabin as more power is diverted to life support. Condensation begins to form on the interior walls. They huddle together for warmth, their breath misting in the frigid air. They are three of the most advanced explorers in human history, yet their situation is as primal as that of shipwrecked sailors adrift on a cold, dark sea, scanning the horizon for a rescuing sail. The incident forces a global reckoning. The abstract threat of space junk is now personified in the faces of the three taikonauts broadcast on screens around the world. Governments are forced to confront the monster in their celestial backyard. For decades, scientists have proposed solutions, ideas that ranged from the practical to the wildly futuristic. Imagine giant nets deployed by a garbage truck satellite to capture large pieces of debris like a celestial fisherman. Consider robotic tugs armed with harpoons latching onto dead satellites and dragging them down into the atmosphere to burn up. Think of powerful ground-based lasers gently nudging small fragments, altering their orbits just enough so that they re-enter the atmosphere over time, a sort of laser broom sweeping the orbital highways clean. These are not fantasies, they are real concepts backed by serious engineering studies. Yet they have remained on the drawing board, stymied by immense cost technical challenges and the lack of a clear international legal framework. Who pays for the cleanup? If a Japanese satellite accidentally damages a French satellite while trying to remove a piece of American debris, who is liable? The problem is as much political as it is technological. The Shenzhou 2.0 crisis acts as a catalyst. An emergency session of the United Nations Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space is convened. Delegates who once debated arcane points of space law are now faced with a life or death situation. The rhetoric is heated, but beneath it a new consensus is forming. The orbital environment is a finite resource. It is a shared heritage of all humankind, and its preservation requires a coordinated global effort. Pledges are made. Funding for debris removal technologies, once a pittance, is suddenly promised. International agreements on satellite design, mandating that all new spacecraft have the capability to deorbit themselves at the end of their lifespan, are fast-tracked. It is a bitter irony that it takes a potential tragedy to spur the world to action that was needed decades ago. Back in orbit, the crew's power reserves have reached a critical level. To conserve the last vestiges of energy for the life support system's final hours, they must shut down their main communications transmitter. They can still receive, but they can no longer send. They are now mute observers of their own fate. Their final message to Beijing is one of grim determination and love. Commander Lee, speaking for his crew, ends with a simple, poignant sign-off. "We have faith in our country. We are ready. Tell our families we love them." Shenzhou 2.0 over and out. The link goes dead. In the Beijing control center, the silence is heavier than any alarm. The faces of the flight controllers are illuminated only by the faint glow of their screens, which now show the spacecraft's icon moving silently across a map of the world, a ghost ship on its final journey. In the Gobi Desert, the rescue mission has reached its climax. The Long March 2F rocket, a colossal white spear, stands on the launch pad, venting cryogenic fumes into the cold desert air. It is Shenzhou 2.1, the lifeboat, the last hope. The countdown is flawless, a testament to the desperate, tireless work of thousands. With a roar that shakes the very desert floor, the rocket ignites. It climbs into the sky on a pillar of fire, a defiant beacon against the darkness. It is a race against time, a multi-million-dollar arrow fired at a moving, tumbling target hundreds of kilometers away. The world watches, holding its collective breath. The crisis of Shenzhou 2.0 has exposed our profound vulnerability. Our modern civilization is woven into the fabric of space. The GPS signals that guide our cars and planes, the financial transactions that flash between continents, the weather forecasts that protect our crops and cities, the global internet that connects us. All these things rely on a fragile infrastructure of satellites. The Kessler syndrome is not just a threat to future space exploration. It is a threat to the very nervous system of our interconnected world. If low Earth orbit becomes an impassable shooting gallery, we would be thrown back into a technological dark age. Our legacy in the heavens would be a glittering cage of our own making, a monument to short-sightedness. The story of the stranded taikonauts is a warning. It is a tale of how the ghosts of our past can rise up to haunt our future. The piece of Soviet debris that crippled their craft was a product of a different time, a different mindset, but its consequences are being felt today. We are the first generation to truly understand this peril. We may be the last generation with a chance to stop it. The choice is ours to continue treating space as an infinite dumping ground, or to begin the difficult, expensive, and necessary work of becoming responsible custodians of this final frontier. The journey of the rescue rocket Shenzhou 21 is more than a mission. It is a symbol of that choice. It is humanity reaching out against all odds to save 3 of its own from a peril of our own creation. Up in the cold, silent darkness inside their crippled capsule, 3 people wait their fate hanging in the balance. Their small, fragile craft a microcosm of a planet grappling with the consequences of its own success. Their ordeal is a message to us all written across the stars. The heavens are not just a resource to be exploited, but a fragile environment that we must protect or risk being forever trapped by the ghosts we leave behind.